Hello and welcome to Global Eye. 2023 will be remembered as a year when India played a pivotal role in global affairs and emerged as the voice of the Global South with a successful G20 summit and a consensus document despite sharp divisions on the Ukraine-Russia war. We were able to build consensus on critical global issues including debt vulnerabilities, food, fertilizer, energy security, multilateral reform. India's G20 presidency also saw the launch of the Global Biofuel Alliance and the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. But a lot of the gains made are now being put to test today because of the Israel-Hamas war, which has threatened security in the Middle East and also led to tensions in the Red Sea. This could lead to massive disruptions in global trade. US-China tensions continue to simmer. However, both countries hope the San Francisco summit will reduce hostilities. India and US had a historic summit in June, which led to a critical jet engine deal being cleared. But the relations between the two nations are being put to test over a murder plot to kill a Khalistani separatist. Here's a report by the Global Eye team on the year gone by in geopolitics.
2023 was a year of conflict and chaos. We entered the year with an already raging war in Ukraine, and now we are witnessing two more conflicts in West Asia and Africa. The Israel-Palestine conflict has been a long-standing one, but October 7 changed everything. Hamas militants attacked Israeli cities, killing over 1,000 people and held many hostage. What followed was a massive retaliation by Israeli forces on Gaza, with the intensity of attacks only growing. Death toll in Gaza has crossed 21,000 Palestinians. Key infrastructure, including hospitals and refugee camps, are being destroyed, and Israel Army Chief warns that the war in Israel will last for many months. This despite warnings from UN over humanitarian pauses and ceasefire. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine continues to rage. With significant backing from the United States, Ukraine has remained resilient. However, Russia's offensive has been ramped up, indicating it is prepared for a longer war. While Ukraine and Gaza hogged the headlines, violence, famine, and genocide in Sudan got little attention. On April 15, violent clashes erupted between Sudanese armed forces and paramilitary rapid support forces. The conflict aggravated Sudan's existing economic and political crisis. Sudanese military has killed thousands of people and has led to the displacement of over 3 million people. 2023 has also been a year of artificial intelligence. The advent of generative AI and chatbots like ChatGPT became a household name. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, has had an eventful year. ChatGPT was a roaring success, but tumult with the company led to the ouster of its CEO, Sam Altman, albeit for just 5 days. Backed by key investor Microsoft, Altman returned as the CEO after a brief rebellion. Concerns over the technology remain, and governments across the world are scrambling to understand and set rules for the industry. Now, India has surpassed China to become the most populous country in the world. India also played host to a G20 summit for the first time in its history. World leaders from 19 countries gathered in New Delhi in September amid unprecedented world events. Climate disasters continue to be a grave concern in the year as well. An earthquake of 7.8 magnitude hit Turkey in February, affecting an area of about 350,000 square kilometers. As per estimates, nearly 60,000 people died and over 40 million people were affected. The year ended with a landmark agreement at the COP28 climate summit for the first time. The word fossil fuels was used in the declaration. All nations agreed to transition away from fossil fuels, but there is no specific timeline, and many experts have criticized the deal for lacking in detail.
All right, we're now joined by former Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Shyam Saran. Ambassador Saran, thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin by talking about the Israel-Hamas war and the tensions in the Red Sea. How do you see them panning out in 2024, and how could this disrupt geopolitics and global trade?
If you recall that a major part of the U.S. effort has been to try and prevent the escalation of the war beyond Gaza, beyond the Israel-Hamas war. But recent events would seem to indicate that, there is creeping escalation already taking place. You have seen the attacks by the Houthis on shipping in the Red Sea. You have seen some attacks being launched by both the US as well as by Israel on targets in Syria. A Revolutionary Guard advisor of Iran, who was located in Syria, has also been killed by an Israeli attack. So my sense is that something which was being limited only to the Gaza Strip has now started, in a sense, without, perhaps the actors willing it. There is already an escalatory process which seems to be taking hold. And that, I think, is a very dangerous situation.
Right. You are seeing the war with the Hamas already escalating. In terms of India, the stakes are high for India, both in the Indian Ocean, in the Middle East as well. These are countries we've tried to invest a lot over the last 2 decades. What are the immediate challenges for India that you see in the coming months as a result of the conflict in the Middle East, which is now spilling over to the Red Sea?
So you yourself mentioned that India made a very big gain by avoiding, in fact, preventing polarization taking place at the recent G20 summit. We were successful, like most people did not expect, in getting a consensus communique of the G20. So that success of India in preventing polarization or further polarization of the international situation, that particular gain has started, in a sense, diminishing, not because of anything that we have done, but the situation is around us is evolving in a manner that actually the international situation is today more polarized than it has been in the recent past. So even if we are talking about India trying to be the voice of the global South, you will see that there is already, in fact, a polarization even in the global South as far as the Israel-Hamas war is concerned. A large number of countries in the global South are very much against what Israel has been doing in Gaza and the kind of suffering that has been brought to bear on very innocent men, women, and children in the Gaza Strip. Now, India has a very special relationship both with the United States as well as with Israel. Now, keeping a certain degree of balance between our very important, very strategic partnership with Israel, but at the same time not losing support within this large constituency of the global South, whose sympathies very much are actually with the Palestinian people. Also, with regard to the West Asia itself, our assumption had been that over a period of time, the process of normalization of relations between Israel and the Gulf countries, Arab countries, which started with the Abraham Accords, and as you know, just before the Israel-Hamas war broke out, there was every expectation that normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia was also around the corner. Now, that particular process has also been stalled, if not reversed. So that means the diplomatic challenge for us in the region has also become somewhat more challenging than it was before.
Right. Ambassador Saran, you're someone who watches China very closely. I'd like to ask you, if you were to watch out for certain cues coming out of China from President Xi Jinping's office in 2024, what would those be?
Well, for the right now, the most important issue for China is really Taiwan. As you know, elections are going to be taking place in Taiwan very soon, in early January. It is not clear who will win the elections, although the odds are in favor of the ruling party, the Diplomatic People's Party, the DPP. And it is likely that China, which is very much against this particular party, ruling party, will probably feel it necessary to pile up the pressure further on Taiwan. On the other hand, if the KMT party is able to win the presidency, you will see that there is a certain amelioration of cross-strait relations which will take place. So there is an uncertainty about what will happen with regard to the Indo-Pacific. Linked to the Taiwan issue. Taiwan issue is not only a geopolitical issue for China. It is very much an emotional issue for China. And you have seen a recent statement by Xi Jinping where he has said that, unification of the motherland is something that is an inevitable a part of Chinese history. It must take place, and it will take place. So there is no let up by China on the Taiwan issue. Now, depending upon how this situation in the Taiwan Strait evolves, this will naturally affect the situation in the Indo-Pacific as well. If, for example, the situation in the Straits becomes more tense, becomes more problematic, then the recent improvement of relations that we have seen taking place between US and China, maybe that will come under greater pressure. So it is not very clear what is likely to happen with regard to the Taiwan issue. The other aspect is that you have Japan, you have South Korea, which are very much concerned about the kind of development of nuclear armaments which is taking place in North Korea. They feel very much threatened by these developments. There is a question of how credible is the US guarantee to these countries who are going to be under greater nuclear threat. So, there is a flux in the region, and it is not very clear how things are going to evolve. So, the year 2024 is going to be one of heightened uncertainty, heightened unpredictability, and also in that context, China will be looking for opportunities to expand its own influence and its presence in the region.
Right. Very important. We've also seen some amount of rapprochement between US and China. We saw that at the San Francisco summit. Even in the UK, some watchers say that the return of David Cameron to government as foreign secretary is probably a cue that UK is wanting stable ties with China. Considering the global preoccupation with two wars at this juncture, Ambassador Saran, what are the challenges for India vis-a-vis China in 2024?
So let me offer a personal perspective. I certainly believe that the United States of America, and in some sense, Western Europe as well, first facing a very difficult situation as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. You see that public sentiment, both in the US as well as in Europe, is in fact flagging in its support for Ukraine in this war against Russia. Secondly, you now have the Israel-Hamas war, where the credibility of the US is also on the line, because on the one hand, the US has gone as far as declaring Putin as a war criminal for whatever actions he has taken in Ukraine. But it is, I think, quite apparent to everyone that what is happening in Gaza far exceeds in terms of its impact, adverse impact, far exceeds what has been happening in Ukraine. So the world is, in fact, saying there is obviously double standards. The credibility of the United States is diminishing, or is in danger of diminishing quite seriously. Now, when the United States of America, as well as Europe, are faced with this kind of a very difficult dual challenge, then it stands to reason, as a professional diplomat, I would say, it would stand to reason that the United States of America would try to see that the tensions with China are contained at a much lower level. I do not see that there would be a very fundamental change in the nature of the adversarial relationship between China and the US, but there is no doubt that an effort is being made by the United States of America to dampen down, the confrontation with China. Now, to what extent that particular dampening down will take place, that will also determine the impact on India. Which has been further complicated by the Khalistan issue that has cropped up with both the US and with Canada. I would point to the fact that Biden, who was expected to come as the chief guest for the Republic Day, has decided not to come. More importantly, the Quad, which is a kind of a centerpiece for the US and for the other Quad countries for the Indo-Pacific strategy, has been postponed and no new date has been set. So this appears to show that the United States of America has decided that the center of gravity of its attention has to temporarily, at least if not permanently, temporarily has to shift somewhat from the Indo-Pacific back to Europe, and also, of course, now the Middle East.
All right. On that note, we have to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. This conversation with former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran continues on the other side.